everyone to our presentation that we just want to welcome everybody to our presentation, and we'll be focusing around utilizing and understanding the Universal Screener tool and how it can best support your students at your school. Now, our theme of our entire theme is for our presentation is light up your school with this tool. So that's something to think about as we go through the Universal Screener tool. Joe Walker Elementary, just like it was stated, is a part of the McGuffey School District, and we are a K-5 elementary school. We have been implementing the positive behavior intervention and supports for the past 13 years. Our PBIS team is consistently meeting, collaborating, and tweaking our interventions and incentives so that we're always supporting our students in the best possible way. And one way we're able to meet the needs of our students is by implementing the Universal Screener tool 3 times a year. And we use this data to make any adjustments needed that best supports our students. Now, we have a wonderful and hardworking and dedicated PBIS team, which I am so honored to be a part of. And it is comprised of myself, Matt Wolf, I'm the principal, Dina Crockett, who's a kindergarten teacher, Shadia DeVito is a school counselor, Marissa Lau is a 4th grade teacher, Carly Wise is our school psychologist, Christy Baldensberger is our reading specialist, and Callie Mezek is our PBIS parent representative. Now, our presentation will highlight what we use, how we use it, and how we analyze data from the screener. Today, we'll be focusing on 4 areas pertaining to the Universal Screener tool. We'll look at how universal screening can support PBIS implementation. We will also look at data integration as a tool to improve and enhance PBIS supports. And we will focus on how the screening data helps us put specific intervention supports in both Tier 2 and Tier 3 groups. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. DeVito, our school counselor, and she's going to dig a little deeper on the Universal Screener.
All right, good morning. Can you hear me? Give a thumbs up.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Just wanted to make sure. I'm here with the team today. We're so excited to be here. I'm going to be talking about universal screeners, just a broad topic overall of what it is. And we figured our audience may have no experience with universal screeners, and then we may have schools that have a lot of experience with universal screeners, but we just wanted to do a presentation that helped everyone. So we're going to start with the foundations of what is a universal screener, and then how we use it here at Joe Walker. So a universal screener is evidence-based screening tool that identifies students that may need additional support and advanced interventions for their academic, behavior, and social emotional skills. So that is what a screener is. There are different types of universal screeners that you can find on the CI3T, which is one of our slides further along. Some are free, some you do have to pay for, but here at Joe Walker, we utilize the SRSSIE. It is free, it is quick, and from our experience, it is a good universal screening tool. I will say that we've been using it for 5 years here at Joe Walker, and we have we'll talk about further along of how we use it and how we've looked at the data to improve our universal screening. So I would also say that part of universal screening, we do it 3 times a year, the fall, winter, and spring. So we've done our fall back in October, which we'll look at the data here in a little bit. And then our winter is just coming up in a few weeks, and our spring will be later on this year. Okay, so Mr. Wolf, if you want to change the next slide. Okay, so as I said, we do it 3 times a year. With that, we found through our experience, we like to control as many variables as we can. So we've learned that we like to keep it consistent between each benchmark. So we will do, we've learned that we do about 12 weeks between the fall and winter, and then winter and spring. We found that that is beneficial to do. We've also found through previous data and screenings to do it all together when we're doing the screening. In the past, we just would send out an email, say, hey, complete this when you can, return it when you can. And we found that the data looked different and was skewed. So we decided as a team, looking at the data, that it's best that we meet all together and do it during one of our faculty meetings. How we do it. So the surveys are sent out prior to the faculty meeting. It's something that even as we're all gathered there, I'll just kind of quickly email each individual teacher. We go over the expectations of 1 minute per child. And then the only prep is needed is that I just compile the class list rosters for the teachers. So it's something they don't have to do while they're meeting there. They could just do the minute for each child, the current behavior. Those are the expectations for the SRS SIE. And it's just quick and easy. When they're done, they just email it back to us.
So when we're talking about 1 minute per child, and what you're going to see, I think it's on the next slide, is an example of, oh, wait, maybe not, the SRSS. And what you're doing, what the teachers are doing is they're kind of looking at a spreadsheet. They have their whole class roster listed, and they're going to go through and think about each child only for 1 minute and kind of check mark any behaviors that they're seeing. It could be externalizing behaviors, such as acting out behaviors, maybe some aggression, maybe some defiance, or it could be internalizing. You know, you want to pull out those kids that have any types of, you know, anxiety, depression, being withdrawn. And a lot of times that's what these screeners really pick up on. So when we're talking about 1 minute per child, that's kind of what we're doing. Using that 1 minute to quickly think, okay, I've seen this behavior, let's check it off. So when Shadi was saying that we gave the teachers, you know, for them to do in the room and how we saw that the data was skewed, what we kind of postulated was that they maybe thought about it more than a minute. You know, they really were kind of taking a look at those students and really going a little bit deeper. But this screener is really meant as a true screener. 1 minute, have you seen the behaviors? Have you not? Move on to the next child.
And I would also say with that, prior to doing the universal screener, when I was doing groups, if any school counselors out there, I would just say, hey, do you have any recommendations? It wasn't database, it wasn't evidence-based. It was just based upon their instinct, or maybe they heard something from the parent. It wasn't based upon data. So that is definitely a true positive of using the universal screener. It is data-based, and you have evidence to support why that child is receiving that intervention. Yes. Okay, so I can go to the next slide.
Wait, that's not what I wanted.
Is you are.
Okay, so we want to talk about data integration now. So we have this tool and this universal screener that we're using. You know, like I said, there's spending 1 minute per child. Yes, it gives us data, but it's one tool. Nobody likes to make decisions based on one measure of a student. So what we do is we wanted to take, as for our team, I don't know, this isn't something that you have to employ, but this is something that our district has decided to do, our team has decided to do. So we wanted to take several different types of data and data from different sources, so we could really justify what types of interventions we're putting into place and making sure that we're creating the right types of interventions. So we want to combine all this data and provide a more holistic perspective and understanding of the child. You know, when you're looking at kids and you're talking about, you know, your school-wide system, those kids with those externalizing behaviors, they're the ones that pop, they're in your face. They're the ones you really know what's going on. So yes, sometimes those behaviors that they're displaying can be blinding just because they're so upfront. So sometimes you need to take that data into consideration and look behind those behaviors and try to find a motivation for those behaviors. We go to the next slide, please. Okay, so why data integration? And that's something that I just went into. So we want to use multiple pieces to gain perspective. So it gives us richer insights into the student. So what we did is we used the data from the SRSS as one data point, and then also created a data wall of sorts where we were able to a spreadsheet assign points to different types of data we're looking at. And some of the data that we're looking at are discipline referrals. If they've had over 4 major or 3 major ODRs, I'm skipping around, so now they're all. That's what I do. But we're looking at nurses' visits. How many times has a student visited a nurse? We're looking at guidance counselor referrals. We're looking at attendance. So we want to incorporate all this data. And like I said before, those kids with those externalizing behaviors really pop. But what these universal screeners and what looking at the whole child means is that we're going to pick up a lot more of those kids that have those internalizing behaviors that aren't outwardly demonstrating that they're having difficulty. So when these teachers are reporting in the SSRS that, they're seeing some, withdrawal behaviors or some shy behaviors or things like that. And then when you couple it and we're saying, this child's been absent. Are they avoiding school? They're going to the nurse. Are they avoiding class? So these are just pieces of information that we could pull together to get a bigger picture of this child.
As a classroom teacher, it was really good to have this tool because we knew that these were the kids who needed something, and we would go to Shadia or the social worker or guidance counselor or psychologist and say that there is something with this child. We know that they're the frequent flyers that go to the nurse all the time. They are the ones, but they're not in your face. They're not the behavior problems. It's really important that now we have some kind of way to document that and look at it so that we have something when we're sitting and talking, we can say, okay, here we have this kid who is showing these kind of behaviors, and here I have some concrete data to show, in addition to all the nurses' visits or the attendance or those kind of things. So it just gives us another piece to reinforce that.
So before we actually show you our data wall and just the overall one piece at the end of the year, while we're just on this slide, if you look at the picture there, it looks at the SRSS for each child, their trend over the year. So the team actually meets at the end of the year, those fun days. We actually get together and we see how the kids did. So not just the individual class, but each individual child. So as you can see there's a picture with the students missing their names, but you could see the SRSS across the fall, winter, and spring. And we see those kids that were remaining in the tier 1 versus those that popped up, as you can see on there, in winter, that were some at risk with the yellow indicators or at risk coming in. There's one there that wasn't there for the fall benchmark, but came into the winter one as a tier 3 concerns. So showing that we needed to really support that child during those winter months. And then, as you can see, we saw improvement through our intervention and became down to some risk. So it just overall sees the trend, and we see that where we almost need to start at the beginning of next year and who we need to keep an eye on. So that's kind of how we finish the year using the SRSS. But the next several slides talk about each benchmark, what it looks like on the data wall. So if we go to the next slide.
Yep, so this is just the data wall. I'm going to put this over because I can't see for each benchmark. So what we are looking at here is, you're seeing at the top, you want to look at your SRSS total score. Mm-hmm. And what the total score combines is any type of externalizing behaviors and also their internalizing behaviors. So it's combining both of those for a total score, but you want to make sure you're looking at all of those sources. Mm-hmm. Okay, because sometimes that internalizing might be a little bit high, but they're not demonstrating anything and they come out with an average score. Mm-hmm. So we like to kind of just break down that data. So we also are looking at counselor referrals. If they have 4 or more, they're getting a point. ODRs, office discipline referrals, 5 minors or 2 majors, we're going to go ahead and give them a point for that. Their attendance, 3 unexcused or 4 tardies is high risk. And any additional stressors we're also indicating. We're thinking about, those kids who are on free or reduced lunch. So is that a stressor? Do they have a 504? Do they have an IEP? So things like that, we're also adding a point to, because we're trying to consider all of those different pieces.
That could be barriers.
Yeah, that could be barriers to their learning. So we come up with a total score, and that's going to put them in one of the tier levels.
Yeah.
It's you. Oh, it's going to put them in one of the tier levels. So they're going to be green for tier 1. They're going to be yellow for tier 2, red for tier 3. And then we go over to kind of the interventions that we're going to implement. We go through, and Shadia goes through and talks about the data that comes out of each classroom. She also gets teacher recommendation on each student. So if we're seeing a student has now hit tier 2, Shadia goes and has those conversations with the teachers to say, what do you think this child needs? And then we kind of come together as a team and come up with the interventions.
So yeah, kind of what Carly was saying, based upon the data well and the screening overall, we do a total, as you saw in the previous slide, that each data point had a scale. And then the total score, as we've kind of worked through, again, looking at past data and seeing what should our breakdown be. Low risk is 1 to 3, some risk 4 to 7, and these are the total points. High risk is 8+. So just to kind of show just how Joe Walker is doing this year, we're very proud of it. It's on their fall 2021 that we just did. And as I said, our winter's coming up. But if you can see the left column there is if we just did the SRSS, just that one piece of data, it is 75% as tier 1. This is just, again, the SRSS data. Tier 2 is 17 and tier 3 is 12. Now, when you look at that,
Shadia or
Yeah.
Mr. Vito, what slide are you on? Just I don't think I'm on the same slide.
you're on the same, you're right on the same slide there.
Okay,
Yep.
I just want to make sure. Sorry.
Absolutely. So that is just the SRSS data. So again, we approach it as a holistic approach. And when you're looking at a holistic approach, that is that second column there. So our tier 1, with all that other components, those other data points, is at 86% tier 1. Tier 2 is 14%, and tier 3 is 0.5%, less than 1%. Okay, so from there, Carly was talking about how the next slide, Mr. Wolf, goes into we meet as a team. So after I compile, I reach out to the school nurse, I get her input. I create the criteria of when we took the SRSS, that date to the end of the timeline between the 2 benchmarks. So she sees her criteria, and I talk to our home and school visitor about attendance and get her input. We put the wall together, the data wall, and then we as a team meet and we review the data. We don't just look at the overall school-wide data, but we look at each individual class. So we pull up each individual teacher, we look at each individual child to see what areas maybe there is a trend of disrespect, and maybe we need just a tier 1 intervention. I know we had that in 5th grade. So I did a guidance lesson and went into the classroom and taught that. It was just an overall theme for that classroom. Or we had a sub that was substituting in 1st grade, and she was having a really hard time with problematic behavior. So we went in and provided more support to her, and we knew she had very minimal experience as a teacher yet. So we provided that support. Now, if there were kids that came up higher risk, then that's when we did more of those tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. But it starts with the team. We collaborate first. We make recommendations on that screener form. And then the next part is collaborating with the teachers.
Yeah. And I want to say Joe Walker is a smaller school, and we're able to collaborate a lot, and it brings such forth such rich information, and our collaboration skills are really what makes this team. I mean, we're constantly talking, we're constantly changing things, constantly improving upon things, and we're always questioning, how can we do more? How can we improve upon what we already have in place, you know, to make it better for our kids and to make success out of this program.
Next slide, please.
Okay, so some of the data we also consider when we're looking at our universal screener and taking a whole picture of the child approach is we're looking at, you know, some of their academic screenings also we take into consideration. You know, we look at their STAR scores, which is, you know, their reading comprehension. We're looking at any of their kindergarten screenings, you know, to see those developmental indicators. You know, sometimes motor skills maybe could be a barrier, some language skills could be a barrier, social skills, their academic course performance, you know, their grades, but not necessarily their grades, but maybe just even a breakdown in grades. You know, are they having difficulty with a certain aspect of a class? You know, are they having difficulty with grammar maybe? Or, you know, some of their spelling, or just maybe regrouping. So we kind of take a look at their grades and do a breakdown to see what kind of barriers we can intervene with. We also take into consideration any PSSA performance to make sure that they're performing at where we know they really should be. And what we value the most is teacher input. You know, what are those teachers seeing in the classroom? What they're the ones that know these children the best. They're with them the most amount of time. You know, what exactly are your observations? I think we can go to the next slide. Once we get back in, somehow we're kicked out. There we go.
Yep, and that's
Oh, that's me. Okay, so I need to see this a little bit. So when we're looking at just SRS data against our collective data, when we break it down, I think that Ms. Vito went through it from the whole school viewpoint. So we also break it down by grade levels. So you can see from these columns from our data, this is last year, end of the year data.
I think this is this year now.
Oh, it is this year? I thought we were using, okay.
Yep, this year.
Okay, so when you break it down against, you know, just SRS and collective data, you see our kindergartners. 31 were in tier 1, just using SRSS. Tier 1 for using all the data, it's 38. I think the biggest thing to highlight is our tier 3 right there. We found 7 just by using the SRSS. But then once we were able to look at all of the data and figure out some interventions to put in place, we're down at 0 for tier 3. So you can see, if you go down and look through the numbers, how we're able to catch more students and be able to provide targeted interventions and be able to really truly flesh out who are those tier 2 and tier 3 kids that will benefit from individualized interventions.
And I will say too, that just because Carla's talking about that tier 3 of 7 with just our SRSS and then the 0% doesn't mean we don't intervene.
Oh, yes.
We identify, no. I just want to make sure that we always intervene. Even if they are, we will say, we just like to see an overall collective holistic approach. But obviously the teacher, right, it's a very subjective, the SRSS is subjective to that teacher's, you know, feelings and experience in that moment. So that we just want to support the teacher too, but we like to see the big picture as well. So we might meet with the teacher and they say, you know, we recommended group counseling and they're having issues more with something specific. It kind of gears us to see if that's the right intervention. We do still intervene even with those kids that pop up. But again, it just shows us overall a bigger picture, if that makes sense. And I know we have some questions in the chat. We will get to that when we get to Q&A. So keep the questions coming. We'll happily answer them at the end.
I think we kind of went over this, didn't we already?
We can go to the next slide, Matt. Yeah, and this is just kind of just how the team, when we do our recommendations, it says team recommendations there. And then to the right of that are just interventions that maybe they've had this year, like maybe this was actually a fall a fall benchmark, but so therefore there hasn't been previous interventions this year. But maybe at the winter one, they did something like check in, check out. So that would be indicated there. So the team understands, you know, we've already tried this, how, and obviously we would know that how it's going, but the teacher can say, hey, they can see this and say, oh my goodness, we've done this, and we're still having concerns. So it's just a little bit of the history, especially if we have a sub in the fall and then the teacher comes back in the winter. It just shows, again, all that we've done to support this child. Okay.
Okay, this is our data from last year and from this year. So to show you what we did with it, some of the things that we did with it. We look for patterns and we look for trends and things that are consistently happening. So last year's data is at the top. You can see how we have low academic performance was lower. We have anxiety, which was high last year, which we can all understand. And I'm sure we all experienced that in the way we taught last year. And last year we were in a hybrid setting. So what we did here at McGuffey was we had two groups, the blue group and the gold group. Blue group came Monday and Tuesday. Everyone was online on Wednesday, and then the gold group was in school on Thursday and Friday. So what that allowed us to do, the class sizes were half. So you were talking between 7 and 10 kids. You only had them for 2 days of the week, but it was a nice small class size. So you were really able to target some academic interventions. As a teacher, you were able to see those things instantly almost, and it helped reduce some of that academics. And it was allowed the teachers in that situation to make connections with the kids, because you had a really small group of kids and you were able to really connect with the kids. And I think that helped last year through all of the, you know, crazy. So they were online for 3 days and in school for 2 days. It helped us get through the majority of the school year without having to go out. Now, we did bring our kindergarten and first grade back 4 days a week because I'm sure you know that is really hard to do kindergarten, first grade. We brought them back all of them back 4 days a week. I believe it was like October time, that it was sometime in the fall that we brought them back. So they were here all 4 days for the majority of the year before we all came back in, I think, March. But you can see how that stuff affected what we were doing at that time.
I wanted to say too, if you look at the data, and just like to support what Dina is saying, the external behaviors were lower because, again, the small size, the connection. But if you could notice there too, our internalizers were higher. Just so it was more internalizing last year interventions to help with the individual cases. So just to support that.
Okay. Next one. Next slide. Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Okay, now this is this year's from the fall, and you can see that there is a somewhat of a difference in the academic performance. Now we're back 5 days. We also have more students in the building because last year some of them chose to stay with the cyber school all year. They weren't in the building, so we had less kids in the building last year, and they're all back this year. So what we are seeing now when we look at the data is kind of what we thought we might see also is our academic achievement is lower than it typically is. And that's something that we are trying to address in, you know, various ways. That is the COVID, which I'm sure we all have seen. So that's it in statistical form. We can see it, what we already knew, and then now we have the data to support what we all do as teachers was happening. Okay, so now what do? We have all of this data, and we love the word data, and we love to collect all of this stuff, you know, and as a teacher, having done this for a long time, it just kind of is, you can put all of this stuff that you already knew, but now you have it, and you can show somebody what you already knew. So it kind of reinforces what you were seeing and knowing as as a teacher. So we have all of this stuff. Now, what do we do with it? Because we can have all the data. If you don't do anything with it, nothing is going to change. Okay, so what do we do with the data? We know that we meet. Okay, well, that's great. We meet and we come up with plans. What we have to do is when we're meeting is it is always based on all of that information. We take it and it is not the same every meeting. It is not the same from year to year. It's always different. So we have to continually change what we are doing. And that is something that we have learned over the years. We've been doing this for a long time. 13 years, is that, you know, yes, we've been doing it. Some of us have been doing it for 13 years. We were on one of the original, you know, teams. So we can see all of the changes, but those changes are necessary. You have to change with your information. You can't just keep doing the same thing or it's not going to work. So we look at it, what do they need? Okay, so maybe this year they need more academic stuff. We can see that. How can we do those things? How can we meet that? Okay, we have kids who were never in school or were not in school last year or who had this small group or were home half the time. When you come back and you go from, you know, having 7 kids in your classroom and now you have 20 kids in your classroom, how that affects them, you know, and what can we do to make sure that we're reaching them? We also, this is something that we have learned over the years, to be realistic about what we can pull off in the time and the resources that we have.
Sometimes we're not on that.
We shoot, yes. And not that you don't shoot for the moon, but then we have to back up and go, yes. Then you have to back up and go, okay, can we really pull that off? No, no. Or how can we take what we really want to do and do it in a realistic fashion? Because we are a small school, which has huge benefits, but we also are a small school. So it's a lot of the same people doing, you know, the same staff doing everything. And we are blessed that we have a great staff and we have a great PTO. And that really has an impact on what we are able to do. So what we also do is we find something that works, and maybe the following year we can do it again, but we might have to tweak it a little bit. You know, we might have to make it a little bit more intense, or we might have to make it a little bit less intense. It worked really well, but we don't need all of that, whatever we did. But all of that stuff is driven by the information that we have. And this is really important to track the interventions and whether or not they're working. And that's something that we have learned over the years that we have to do, because what happens is when you have a year where you have a lot of tier 3, you are implementing things, and then you are so busy in your team that you don't always have time to go back and look. You're like, okay, we did something with this kid. And that's the reality reality of it. You know, we can say, but that's really sitting here, having done this for so long. This is reality. We put them on a check-in, check-out, and then we have to move on to the next one. We have to, and now since our tier 3 is lower, it has really allowed us to be able to look back and go, okay, it's been 6 weeks, 8 weeks. What do we need to do now? Is it working? Do we need to change it? And that's really how you can make those behaviors go from a tier 3 to a tier 2 to a tier 1.
Just the constant collaborating and communication with the team and the teachers involved is incredibly helpful. I can't stress that enough. The constant collaborations and how we collaborate is so important into putting all of this into practice.
And I was going to say too, just so you know, we've had years of higher tier 3.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
And we have years of higher tier 2. This year, we are so blessed with what we have. And it's really allowed us to reflect more of and zhuzh it up to tier 1. And looking at what else we need to do to support in tier 2 and going for a tier 3.
Yes.
So, which we'll get to.
Did you want to talk about how we've changed tier 1?
Yeah, that's coming up.
Okay, maintaining tier 1.
There you go.
You're ahead of the game. You always
She was
get
ready for it.
Okay, so maintaining tier 1, and this is something that we've really had to focus on. So what we have our jet winners. We are Joe Walker. So if you know about Joe Walker, he broke the sound barrier. So that's kind of our theme. So every week we give out a jet to, the teachers get to choose one student from their classroom who was soaring all week long. And they get a jet. We have a little jet that they bring down to the office, and they get to put their name on a hundreds chart. And then when one of the rows fills up on the hundreds chart, they get we have an activity that they do. They have to soar, and I'm saying that like everybody knows what that is. I'm sorry. That is our mantra here. Yeah, our matrix. Safe, organized, accountable, and respectful. And the kids all know that. And those are the things that we focus on. So when you have that student in your room who is soaring all of the time and maybe didn't win the mystery motivator, this was a way that we decided a few years ago to kind of continually recognize those students. So they get to go down and they get recognized. They also have their picture on the wall on a bulletin board, which we added last year. And then this year we added to we have a television. So we added a television in the right when you come in, and now their pictures come up on the television, and they love it. They love that. They love watching that. And that changes all the time. We also do our mystery motivators. That's where here at Joe Walker, they get tickets. They get a SOAR ticket, and that is our tangible that they get. They go in, they stay in a class, they collect them in the classroom, and then they're collected every week, and every 2 weeks from each classroom, 1 or 2 tickets is chosen to participate in the mystery motivator. Some of those are Christmas time. We had a Grinch party, Thanksgiving. We had we do them every 2 weeks. We had a turkey minute to win it game. We have a vampire's tea and at Halloween. We've done scavenger hunts, bubbles and bubble gum, slime, always have slime, a couple times a year to have slime. They make snow, all of those kind of things. Some of those we keep, and then some of them we've done and we go, that was a flop. So that one goes away, we don't do it again. But some of them we keep from year to year. So we also, like I said, we give out the SOAR tickets. Last year, we were able to add a component that we had been wanting to add, but because of the way we were situated last year with the hybrid model, we were able to implement SOAR ambassadors, and that is our student voice. So what we did last year was we went to the classrooms, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and we went to the classrooms and we explained what an ambassador was, what we wanted the SOAR ambassadors to do. We wanted to really have some student input because we're doing all of these things for them. And you know, some of us have children at home, and we're still trying to find stuff that's motivating to them, and we're grown-ups. So we really wanted to have some input from them. So we did an application, and they filled out an application, and it was a little bit intense. It was very intense, but that was okay. That's what we wanted. So we really wanted those kids that are really going to buy into it. So we did those, and then from those we did interviews, and we interviewed them, and then we chose a number of students. We didn't pick a specific number. We picked the students who really shone. So some grades had 5, some grades had 7, some grades had 4. So last year, that was the first year we were able to do it. And what they also did was they did a building climate survey that our principal at the time was really encouraging. He really wanted to hear what the kids had to say. So they made a Google form with the questions on it for 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Then they made a paper form for K1 and 2 to do. They went to the classrooms, they administered it, and then we looked at all of the data. And it was really interesting and really helpful for us to get that information from the kids, what their buy-in was, why they really enjoyed. There was a theme last year that they wanted a donut. Like everything came up, they wanted donuts. Everybody we asked, like we got it from, I can't even tell you how many kids. So this year, we didn't even think about it. We give them the jet. We were giving them the jet on our jet winners. We were giving them the jet. They would put their name on the hundreds chart, and then that was kind of all we were doing. They weren't getting anything tangible. And a few of them said that that was something that they thought they wished they got, even if it was a little piece of candy, but just some kind of tangible thing, because if they didn't win on the hundreds chart, then they didn't get any really big reward for it. So this year, when they get the jet, they get a donut. And they love the donuts. So we just kept with the donuts. They wanted them, they love them, they come back, they're excited, they got a donut. You know, they got to spin the wheel and find their number. So that was one way that we used their input. They also, the SOAR ambassadors also help when we're doing the mystery motivators. We take turns. They also collect the tickets. They help with the jet winners, because that's a component that has a couple pieces. So they are able to help with all of that. They've given us ideas that they want to do as mystery motivators. I meet with them when we've scheduled it that I meet with them when Miss Delvado comes into my room to do a guidance lesson. And we talk about, you know, do they see anything that we don't? And they would see issues that we were not seeing in the building. Like there was things happening in the cafeteria that we weren't really aware of. They weren't huge things, but they were things that were, you know, oh, okay, that needs to be addressed. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. And it'll be time now for us to start looking for our next group of next group of ambassadors. So our ambassadors will go in and they're so willing to do anything. We did interviews for the kids of how they liked their mystery motivator or jet winners so that we could share that. They were willing, they were doing that with me. School doesn't start till 8 o'clock. We were starting that at 7:30. They're willing because they're here. They're really willing and they're looking for things to do. And they are real. And I think it gives some of the kids someone to go to rather than going to an adult. They have kind of an in-between person that they can go to and say something about, you know, not getting a ticket or whatever they need to. It's really been a great help. Okay, our PTO is phenomenal here at Joe Walker. We will we'll take turns going to a PTO meeting and discussing it. Our PTO is very supportive. Our Callie Mezek, she is on our PTO. She is the person that meets with us when we're talking about tier 1, and she takes information back to the PTO and they help support us in any way. She's also able to go out and, you know, help. We can't find green tablecloths for the grid. She's out, she's looking for green tablecloths.
I know not a lot of teams have a parent on their team, but it has been invaluable to have that parent voice. When we're talking about tier 1 and basic issues, having that parent voice to connect with the community members, to connect with the PTO is on exactly what we're doing here in the school. I mean, we just feel that support.
And also, just to give an example, so at PTO meeting, parents were asking, we send postcards home when a student is identified as a jet winner and mystery motivator. And they didn't know, they were like, why is my child, what is a jet winner? What's a mystery motivator? They were kind of confused. Callie stepped up during a PTO meeting and said, hey, this is the difference. This is what your child was recognized for. Talk to them. What did they earn it for? So she's been very valuable. She's helping us now with mystery motivators too, as PTO represent, hey, we need some gift cards for this, or we need some green tablecloths for that. So she's been a wonderful part of this team. I will say too, I know we're talking universal screening. So with our data is so good to this year, we've really looked at the data and put this stuff consistently in place. Like our mystery motivators are every other week, and we've been consistent with it. And I think that it supports that tier 1 being so high. So we're hopeful that when we do the winter benchmark, just being consistent, having the reboot mid-year reminders, just that our universal screener stays at that 80-some%. So tier 2.
So the consistency for tier 1 is incredible, and you can see it working in the classrooms. When that jet winner is called, sometimes you can even hear the kids saying, I knew it. She worked hard all week. So you can see it working. And when we talk about tier 2, that's more group focused. So that's usually done with the school counselor, where they will do a pre-test and a post-test for those groups for anything that you see on that screen, whether it's self-esteem or social skills or motivation, focus groups to like really try to help the children as much as you can in that group setting. And it's not just one-on-one, it would be several kids working on the same area, the same skill, whatever they need, which also builds that culture that you're not alone. There are also behavior contracts, academic interventions, movement breaks, the punch tickets that you see on the screen. Those punch tickets are for attendance to help, get the kids here, and motivational surveys.
So I was gonna say, when we identified and we met with the teacher and they're like, yes, I think that child could do really good with self-esteem based upon the SRSS data, self-esteem group, then I send out permissions. And then we do pre and post tests, like Christy said, to the student, I use the data for the universal screener as teacher input. I used to do individual teacher pre and post, but I think this is more valuable. And then I also send it to the parent too for their input if there's anything that they need to work on. And if you see, the SOAR is one of that group that it is there in my toolbox if needed, specifically with PBIS and working on those specific skills. Sorry. No, you're good. Yep. Okay, next slide.
So now there's a difference between tier 2 and tier 3. And we worked really hard this year to kind of break those apart and separate them into 2 different tiers so that it's not just one thing anymore. So for tier 2, we have a separate chart for tier 2, and we collaborated with each of the grade levels to create that chart. And it is based off of the SOAR expectations, and what those teachers and what that grade level expects. What does safe mean in 5th grade versus kindergarten? Well, we might think it's the same. There are small changes that we need to make for some of those. Being respectful, what are the differences? So that's noted on the tier 2 charts based off of the different grade levels. That is also a group approach that we're doing with, the kids. And we're collecting the data on the charts, and we're looking at that for several weeks to see if what we're doing is working. And if it's not working, or if we're noticed that they're not meeting their goals, then we move them into a tier 3 chart, which the team would then look at for an individualized chart based off of whatever area that student needs to improve on. So tier 3 then becomes very individualized. It's no longer that group setting. It is that maybe one-on-one situation where you're really trying to focus on one of the skills. If you could go to the next slide. So some of the interventions at tier 3, you can see on this screen. We have school-based counseling, check-in, check-out programs, check and connect, 504s. And, if we're still, having some issues, we would have referrals to special ed for IEPs. And just one other quick thing that we're looking at this for about 6 to 8 weeks, not just 2 weeks, not just 3 weeks. We're looking at for a long duration of time to make sure that we're getting accurate data and collecting as much information as we can.
And this year we really tried to hone in and separate between tier 2 and tier 3. So that's been since we have a little bit more time, that's what we're working on this year as a team in our action plan for PBIS. Okay, we're gonna keep going because of time. So just overall, as we come to just about the end here, just prioritize your time as a team, make it realistic what you're actually able to do, collaborate. We find is the biggest and best support that we can do. We have an amazing team, but as we've mentioned too, our staff is amazing, our community is amazing. We have support from above, from superintendent down, so that also helps. So it's just that collaboration piece. And, sometimes we don't realize how good we have it. We're very blessed here to have it because we do. Always, as Dina said, we're trying to always spice up our tier 1 and make it better as a reflection to that.
To keep it motivational for the students.
Exciting.
And
Yeah,
fun.
yes.
And for the faculty too.
Yes.
All of us. Sure. And then just getting student voice, and then looking at multiple pieces of data, and then interventions as needed. Okay. So the next slide is just our resources there. Just has a video of things that we've done or resources that have helped us along the way. Okay, and then any questions? I know we do have some questions in the chat. And I know we have about 10 minutes left. I know if we get someone can.
Yeah.
Before we start to jump into questions, a heartfelt and huge thank you. This is a fabulous team that I've been so blessed to see through the years. I wish we were here in Pittsburgh. I love it when you guys share live. But thank you so much for being here. And let's open it up because I would love for you to share your expertise.
Well, there's such
Thanks, Kathy.
There's such kind words in the chat also. Love the 1 minute rule. So excited for your team, for a chance to share. Super cute. Love it. Thanks, guys. That's so nice.
And you can reach out to any one of us if you have questions too, if we don't get to your question and we can answer them.
It's on the next page. Our next slide is our emails.
About how many students or staff we have in the building.
We have about 200 kids
Mhm.
and staff,
40, about 40 staff.
about 40 staff. And
40.
we think of that as everybody in the
Yes.
building.
This is a great question. It talks about when we meet and talk and work together. Is there time for the school during the school day for that?
So,
Not structured time.
no,
No.
we don't pull everybody during structure time. We usually meet at 3:05 to 3:35. We did get TIPS trained this year, thanks to Amy Dillo, and we have been running officially TIPS meetings. So we've been trying to stay
On to that 3:35 anyway, but it doesn't usually happen.
But we have an amazing team that works on the agenda and items prior to and works
Yes.
on in between.
And that's also based on what we need. Like,
Yes.
we try and meet a couple, like 2-3 times a month for
Month, yes.
sure. And then depending on what we need, we will meet additionally for that. Matt will rearrange coverage or whatever so that we're able to meet again because there's something coming up.
3 Wednesdays a month is typically our
Yeah.
guideline. 2 of them are tier 1 and then tier 2, tier 3, at least 1 meeting to look at the data and another meeting if we need to fit it at CSN.
But during the day.
And I just think that that's, just to add that, I just think it's so important just to, for that adjustment and the value, just to putting that forward and spending that time is really invaluable, just to always constantly change, just like the team has just suggested. We're adjusting, we're flexible and we're tweaking and we're constantly doing that. And it's just an important part of the school and developing that culture. And that's why we invest 3 times a week or 3 times a month, really developing that as a team. So I think it's just the commitment of the team and just us as a school moving forward. So.
Is your building broken up into separate teams, et cetera?
Basically 1 team.
One team.
A
Tier
little,
1, tier 2, tier 3, ESAP.
yeah, I mean, it's very similar. I would say that a little different when we do have tier 2 or tier 3 students, then we have our school social worker join us. We'll invite her. And also too, we do a school base with SBHS. They will, we invite them as well to join us to collaborate and to see if someone's receiving therapy through them, updates or anything else that we could do as a school to support them. So, but most of all, it's us. We're all this, pretty much the core.
I've been so blessed to watch your implementation across those 13 years. Way to go. I love that you finish each other's sentences.
Any other questions?
No other questions that I see, but just kind words, super kind words. We love kind words. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a question they want to bring up right now?
And I think the presentation was posted in the chat. Was that correct? And so our emails are on there too. So if you have anything additional, you feel free to reach out and we would be happy to support and help you in any way. So for sure.
Absolutely. So I'm trying to share the final slide. I don't know if that was visible yet for you folks. Did you see the slide for the closing code? Has that popped up for you all?
It's up there.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So not to interrupt any of these wonderful sharing across the team, but if you're seeking credit, make sure that you populate that code. And the survey will be needed to be processed by January 24th. Guys, this has been incredible. I mean, tons of great resources. Amy, you have done a great job. McGuffey, you guys are such champions. Any other questions? I know she's clapping down there. I love it.
All right.
I didn't want to stop the flow, guys. We still got a good 6 minutes if you'd like to stick around. And the code again is 5225 for anyone that is seeking that 5225. All right. Matt, I think it's been a great day. Amy,
It
fantastic job.
was great. We really appreciate it. We feel honored just to even present. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.
Oh my goodness. So glad to have you all here. I'm going to repopulate the survey link, and then you will likely get also a reminder in your email. That's usually our protocol. But there's your link. And everyone, thank you so very much. Have an amazing rest of the day. Go PA PBS.